What if I told you the man who might control one of the most powerful countries in the world has almost no public presence at all? No speeches, no interviews, no spotlight. And yet, his influence is felt at the very top of power. This isn't fiction. This is real. This is the story of Mojtaba Khamenei, a man many call the shadow figure of Iran. In a world where leaders fight to be seen, where power is built through cameras, headlines, and public image, Mojtaba chose a completely different path. He stayed invisible. And that's exactly what makes him so powerful. Because when you can't see power, you can't fully understand it. And when you can't understand it, you can't control it. Born into one of the most powerful families in Iran, his life was never meant to be ordinary. His father, Ali Khamenei, holds the highest authority in the country, a position that shapes everything from politics to military decisions. Growing up in that environment doesn't just teach you about power, it surrounds you with it every single day. But unlike most people in his position, Mojtaba didn't step into the spotlight. He didn't build a public image. He didn't seek attention. Instead, he watched, he listened, he learned. While the world focused on visible leaders, something else was happening quietly in the background. His name started to circulate, not in the media, but inside powerful circles. Inside closed-door meetings, inside government corridors, inside conversations the public would never hear. Some dismissed him as just the son, but others, those closer to the system, began to see something different. A man who didn't need a title because his influence was already there. A gatekeeper, a decision maker, a presence that could shape outcomes without ever stepping forward. And that's where the mystery begins. Because even today, there is no clear answer to one simple question. What exactly is his role? No official position, no confirmed authority, yet somehow always near the center of power, always connected to the people who make the biggest decisions. And maybe that's what makes this story so unsettling. The idea that real power doesn't always stand in front of you. Sometimes it stands quietly in the shadows. He wasn't just born into a family. He was born into power itself. Before the world even knew his name, his future was already being shaped inside one of the most powerful systems on Earth. This is where the story of Mojtaba Khamenei truly begins. Born in 1969 in the city of Mashhad, Iran, a place known not just for its culture, but for its deep religious and political influence. But what made his childhood different wasn't just where he was born. It was who his father was becoming. Because at that time, his father, Ali Khamenei, wasn't just a cleric. He was a rising revolutionary figure, fighting against the monarchy, helping shape what would soon become the Islamic Republic of Iran. Imagine growing up not in a normal home, but inside a revolution. While other children were living ordinary lives, Mojtaba was witnessing history being written in real time. Meetings, political discussions, religious debates, all happening around him every single day. And then everything changed. In 1979, the Iranian Revolution succeeded, and suddenly his father wasn't just a revolutionary anymore. He became part of the system, a system that would eventually put him at the very top of power. As years passed, his father rose higher, from a political figure to president, and then to the supreme leader of Iran in 1989, which meant one thing: Mojtaba wasn't just growing up in a powerful family anymore. He was growing up at the center of an entire nation's control. Think about that. The decisions that affected millions, the strategies that shaped a country, they weren't happening far away. They were happening around him, inside rooms he could walk into, inside conversations he could hear. And slowly, without anyone noticing, he wasn't just watching power, he was learning it. But here's what makes this story even more intense. Unlike many children of powerful leaders, Mojtaba didn't step into the spotlight. He didn't give speeches. He didn't appear in public. Instead, he stayed quiet, observing, understanding, adapting. Because growing up inside such a system teaches you one thing very clearly. Real power isn't always loud. Sometimes it grows silently, in the background. And by the time the world notices it, it's already too late. He didn't learn power in public. He learned it in silence. Far away from cameras, far away from attention, in a place where influence is built quietly. This is where Mojtaba Khamenei's real transformation began. After his early education, he moved to one of the most important cities in Iran, a city known not for politics, but for shaping the minds behind it, Qom, a place where Iran's most powerful clerics are trained, where ideology is built, where belief turns into authority. And this is where Mojtaba Khamenei chose to disappear. No media, no attention, no public identity. Just study, silence, and preparation. Inside the seminaries of Qom, he wasn't learning ordinary subjects. He was studying Islamic jurisprudence, theology, philosophy, the kind of knowledge that doesn't just teach religion, it teaches control. And here's what makes this even intense. He wasn't just a student. He was learning from some of the most powerful clerics in Iran, mentors who shaped the country's ideological direction. Slowly, step by step, he moved deeper into the system. Years passed, and while the world barely knew his name, inside Qom, his position was growing. He reached advanced levels of clerical education, teaching high-level classes known as Dars-e-Kharish, a level only reserved for the most serious scholars. But even then, he didn't step into the spotlight. No public recognition, no media presence. It was almost as if he didn't want to be seen. Because maybe he understood something very few people do. The less people see you, the more powerful you can become. While politicians build fame, he was building influence. While others chased attention, he was mastering silence. And that silence became his greatest weapon, because inside Qom, he wasn't just becoming a cleric, he was becoming something much more dangerous. A man who understands both religion and power. And when those two combine, they don't just shape people, they shape nations. He didn't rise through elections. He didn't rise through speeches. He rose in the shadows. While the world was watching presidents, ministers, and public figures, something very different was happening behind closed doors in Iran. This is where Mojtaba Khamenei's quiet rise truly began. No official announcement, no title, no spotlight. And yet, his presence started to be felt in places that really mattered. Inside offices, inside private meetings, inside the inner circle of power. At the center of all this was one place, the office of his father, Ali Khamenei, one of the most powerful political positions in the world. And this wasn't just an office, it was the control room of an entire nation. Military decisions, political strategies, national policies. Everything flowed through here. And somewhere inside that system, Mojtaba was no longer just observing, he was becoming part of it. Reports and insiders began to suggest something unusual, that Mojtaba Khamenei had started playing a role, not in public, but behind the scenes. A role where he could influence decisions, build relationships, and connect with powerful figures across the system. But here's the key detail. He still had no official position, no title that defined his authority. And yet, his influence kept growing, which raises a powerful question. How do you measure power when it doesn't come with a title? Because real power doesn't always need recognition. Sometimes it operates through access. Access to leaders, access to information, access to decisions. And Mojtaba had all three. Over time, he built strong connections with key figures, political elites, security officials, religious authorities. The kind of network that doesn't just support power, it sustains it. And slowly, a new perception started to form, not in public, but inside the system itself. That Mojtaba Khamenei was no longer just the son, he was becoming a gatekeeper. A man who could influence who gets access, who gets heard, and who gets ignored. Think about that. In a system where access is everything, controlling access means controlling power. And the most fascinating part, he was doing all of this without ever stepping into the spotlight. No public accountability, no direct scrutiny, just quiet influence, growing stronger day by day. And that's what made his rise so different. It wasn't loud, it wasn't visible, it was strategic, calculated, and almost invisible. Until one day, people started to realize that the man they rarely saw might already be one of the most powerful figures in the country. He never wore a crown. He never held the highest title. And yet, many believe he stood right behind it. Because in Iran's complex power structure, real control isn't always where it seems. Sometimes, the man behind the throne holds more power than the one sitting on it. This is where the story of Mojtaba Khamenei becomes even more intense. Over the years, whispers began to turn into serious discussions. Discussions about his growing influence, not just in politics, but inside one of the most powerful forces in Iran, the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, often called the backbone of Iran's power. This is not just a military force, it's an organization that controls strategy, security, and in many ways, the direction of the country itself. And according to various analysts, Mojtaba Khamenei had built strong connections within this powerful network, connections that gave him something very few people have: influence without visibility. Think about that. When you have ties to the military, access to leadership, and trust inside the system, you don't need an official position because power is already in your hands. And then things became even more controversial. Rumors started to spread, allegations that he may have influenced key political events, even elections, especially during moments of unrest when the country faced internal tensions. These claims were never fully confirmed, but they were never completely dismissed either. And that's what makes this story so complex, because when something is hidden, it's hard to prove, but it's also hard to ignore. So the question becomes, what is real power? Is it the title you hold or the control you exercise behind the scenes? Because officially, Mojtaba Khamenei holds no top political position, no presidency, no declared leadership role. But unofficially, many believe his influence reaches far deeper than any title could. a silent authority, operating behind layers of secrecy, shaping outcomes, building alliances, maintaining control, all without ever stepping fully into the light. And that's why some call him the power behind the throne. Because in the end, the most dangerous kind of power is the one you can't clearly see.
For years, he stayed invisible. No headlines, no global attention, no direct scrutiny. But then, everything changed. In 2019, the world's most powerful country made a move. A move that suddenly pushed a hidden figure into the international spotlight. The United States imposed sanctions, not just on officials, but on individuals connected to the highest level of Iran's leadership. And among those names, one stood out: Mojtaba Khamenei. A man who rarely appeared in public, now officially recognized by global powers. Think about that for a second. You don't sanction someone unless you believe they have real influence. And this decision sent a clear message. The world was no longer ignoring him. He was now being watched closely. These sanctions were part of a broader strategy, targeting the inner circle of Iran's leadership, including those believed to play key roles behind the scenes, even without official titles. And suddenly, Mojtaba Khamenei was no longer just a mystery inside Iran. He became a name discussed in international reports, policy debates, and global media. Analysts in the West began raising serious concerns. Who is this man? How much power does he really have? And what role might he play in the future of Iran? Because if someone without a formal position is influential enough to be sanctioned, then his role might be far bigger than anyone publicly admits. And that's what made this moment so important. For the first time, the shadow figure was no longer just a shadow. He had entered the global stage, not through speeches, not through elections, but through concern, through suspicion, through power. And maybe that's what made it even more unsettling. Because now the world wasn't just asking who he is, they were asking, what happens if he steps out of the shadows completely? Because once a hidden figure gains global attention, the story doesn't end there. That's where it truly begins. Everything was quiet, controlled, predictable. And then, suddenly, everything changed. A crisis began to unfold, tensions rising, conflicts intensifying, uncertainty spreading across the region. Moments like these don't just shake countries, they expose power, and sometimes they reveal the people hiding behind it. For years, Mojtaba Khamenei remained in the background, but crises have a way of pulling hidden figures into the spotlight. As instability grew, so did speculation. Whispers turned into serious questions about leadership, about control, about the future of Iran. And then, something even more shocking started to circulate. Reports, unconfirmed but powerful, about the health and even the possible death of his father, Ali Khamenei. Think about the impact of that. When the highest authority in a country becomes uncertain, the entire system begins to shift. Power doesn't stay empty for long. Someone always steps in. And in that moment of uncertainty, one name kept coming up again and again: Mojtaba Khamenei, a man who had never officially led, now being discussed
as a possible successor. A man who had stayed in the shadows, now potentially moving toward the center of power. Almost overnight, the narrative changed from mystery to possibility, from hidden influence to visible control. But here's where it gets even more intense. Nothing was officially confirmed. No clear announcements, no direct transition, just speculation. And yet, the silence itself spoke volumes. Because in systems like this, what isn't said can be just as powerful as what is. Analysts began watching closely, trying to understand. Is this the moment he steps forward? Is this the transition from shadow to throne? Or is it just another layer of a system built on secrecy? Because if the rumors were true, then everything he had been building quietly for years was leading to this exact moment. A crisis, a power vacuum, and a man perfectly positioned to fill it. And if that happens, then the world won't just be dealing with a hidden figure anymore. It will be facing a leader shaped entirely in the shadows.
The truth is, no one really knows what's happening. Not completely. Not clearly. And that's what makes this moment so dangerous. Because for the first time, the power at the top of Iran feels uncertain. This is where the mystery reaches its peak. The story of Mojtaba Khamenei is no longer just about influence. It's about uncertainty, confusion, and unanswered questions. After the recent conflict, reports started spreading everywhere. Some claimed he was injured. Others said he was completely fine. And some even questioned whether he was truly active at all. Iranian officials insist he is safe and sound, even if he suffered minor injuries during the war. But at the same time, other reports suggest something very different, that he may have been hurt more seriously, possibly hiding in a secure location with very limited communication. And then, the biggest question of all, why hasn't he appeared publicly? No clear speech, no verified video, no strong public presence. For a leader of a country in crisis, that silence is unusual. And in that silence, speculation grows. Some analysts believe that even though he holds the title of supreme leader, the real control might not be entirely in his hands. Because during the ongoing conflict, another powerful force has become even stronger: the Islamic Revolutionary Guards Corps, a military organization that now plays a dominant role in Iran's strategy and decisions. Think about that. If the military holds operational control and the leader remains unseen, then who is truly in charge? Is it the man at the top or the system behind him? This is no longer just a political question. It's a global concern, because Iran is not just any country. Its decisions impact oil markets, regional stability, and international security. And when leadership becomes unclear, the risk becomes unpredictable. Now the future stands at a crossroads. Will Mojtaba Khamenei step forward and take full visible control? Or will he continue ruling the same way he always has? From the shadows. Because if history tells us anything, it's this: he was never meant to be a visible leader. He was built to operate in silence. And maybe that's exactly how he will lead Iran's future.